millennial tech entrepreneur. I think you bring your book.
I did. I
With
brought
you,
my book.
and,
Yes.
and I think some of them are signed also.
They're all signed.
She co-founded my yearbook at age of 15. Okay, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? And grew it to become a company called Meet Me Group. I don't know you ever used that social media platform, Meet Me Group, Meet Me. And it was a NASDAQ listed social dating and live streaming company. In 2021, she was named the Earnest Young Entrepreneur of the Year in the Philadelphia region. And she has been featured on CNBC, Wall Street Journal, ABC News, Fox News, Business Week, and CBS. Okay? Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Todd Schorle. He's a manager of the coaching at PAX 8 Academy, which works with executive coaches to develop owners and operators in managed IT provider industry. He works with leadership teams of the service providers and create growth and scalable business systems. Todd has a lot of experience, international experience. Just before this panel, we were talking about how to mentor and coach these innovation teams, both in the US and overseas. And before joining PAX 8, Schorle owned and managed IT services firm from 1996 to 2019. He is a 2002 graduate of Penn State Berks with a Bachelor of Science in Business Management and Marketing. Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask first a few questions, and then we will open up. To audience. But I think I'm going to start with that first. Can you describe yourself in 3 words, and who you are as an entrepreneur, and why entrepreneurship, and what is your story?
Okay, so I heard 2 questions there. Describe yourself in 3 words, and
yes,
who you are as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Driven, impatient, practical.
Practical. Wow.
That's
the definition of entrepreneur.
Wow. And that served me well. I started my business before I came to Penn State here. And so me as an entrepreneur, I always tell the story as I was hungry for money. That's the simple answer. I didn't know I was starting a business, but when I started working, I was 14 years old, making $4 an hour. I was unhappy making $4 an hour. I thought there had to be a better way out there. And so starting a business allowed me to do tech work very early. I think the first rate I charged was $35 an hour. I was like, that's pretty good money. So I was driven, I was hungry.
So that is the reason, the motivation.
That was my initial motivation, yeah. Okay. It changed over the years, but that was what got me started.
Catherine?
So my 3 words,
yes.
I guess, innovative, curious, and go generous. Because as an entrepreneur, so what I found, my story was basically almost stumbling into it. As a high school sophomore, I didn't have any experience in anything because I was a high school sophomore. But I was curious, found out how to, use Google as basically an age equalizer to find out how to find developers, how to do these things. When we were a public company, it was a lot of, at that point, not Googling things, but still a lot of learning. And I think, I've always stayed curious and always tried to learn. And then generous, because I think that when it comes to, or at least I aspire to be generous, I try to be generous with, what I've learned along the way. And because I think that especially for young women entrepreneurs, there's a lot of stories that aren't out there. So I try to be generous with mine and try to share it and try to help others, craft their own. And then innovative, because you kind of have to be innovative if you're creating stuff.
So what motivated you to write your book?
So what motivated me to write the book, well, first was just leaving my company after 18 years at it. We had sold it for a $500 million deal. Now we're worked for the new parent company for 3 years. After that, it's like this huge part of my identity was just tied up with the company. So I felt that there had to be this catharsis thing of like, I need to write a book about this. I always wanted to write a book, so I wrote a book. But how I crafted the book was really about how I hope help others, not just on their entrepreneurial journey, but also think about how they want to design their lives. Because from my experience, running the company, as also, managing being a high school student, managing being a college student, managing starting a family and dating and finding my husband and all of that, I learned important things for how to structure a career that I think is missing in a lot of in how people enter the world. You're kind of just said, oh, here's the treadmill, keep going, and there's so many people that are having trouble with burnout. So my book was hopefully trying to address that, and so that you can take your life, the reins in your life again. So that was one of, when it comes to like setting boundaries, making efficient decisions, these are all things that entrepreneurs need to do. It's also all things that all people need to do. So I was hoping to kind of shed light on how I've been able to navigate them, through my lens as an entrepreneur.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is a very good segue to our topic today. Today we're going to discuss about mentorship, okay? Because in the Seed Center, one of our goals is to match student entrepreneurs with the outside mentors from the industry, as well as the faculty mentors. And we do a lot of mentorship at different levels, from undergraduate research to, I should say the coaching maybe of entrepreneurial teams. So we're going to discuss today mentorship. I know you both took roles as mentorship to our students or in your company. So my first question is, how do you provide guidance while allowing mentors to make decisions and learn from their mistakes? I think let's Todd, go with you again first.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
You hear that? It's silence. And one of the things that I found is the most important piece as a mentor or a coach is to actually let there be silence. If I stay quiet long enough, people feel this awkward tension. They feel compelled to start talking what's on their mind. And when they start talking, now I can start to understand either what's enabling or what's blocking them. But if I, as the mentor or the coach, speak too much or too often, I fill the noise. I don't let them speak up. So for me, one of the first tactics I use is that silence. The second tactic that I would say I really drive into is people don't care what I know about anything until I can make them understand that I care about them. So one of the first things that I do when I'm speaking with someone is make sure that I understand what's going on in their life. What are they passionate about? What's bringing them to work every day? What are they stuck on? I want to know more about that at home than I want to know about what's happening in their job or in their career or in their company, because the two are very connected.
Yes, amazing. Anything?
Yeah, I think that and with that, it's also so important, like when you're mentoring, when you're just also hearing just other concepts, to remember that they're not you. So whenever you're in a situation, the advice that you might give yourself at that age is very different than the advice that you might give someone else, like going through their unique journey, because that's what it is. Everyone's journey is going to be unique, and so it's finding the similarity so that you can just say help guide people in the right direction. But that's also something that people don't want to be told, or I don't know any people that want to be told what to do. That's just not fun, and that's not how you want to be able to discover things on your own. And so that's kind of with mentoring, you want to just help the person be guided into that way, while still realizing as like the mentor that's not, that they're going to make different decisions than you necessarily would make, and that's to be celebrated.
So I think I'm going to ask the harder part of the question again. Okay. Now, this is the challenge that I have all the time. And you know that, your mentee is making mistakes in your mind. That's your, duty to tell them, it's not maybe it's the best interest of them going that direction. So that's a challenge, actually, to communicate that, to communicate the mistake, to communicate the, negative things to your mentors. But I think you have to do it. So what is your strategies to do that?
Yeah. So the strategy to when they do something wrong.
Yes, or no,
Or when
no,
you
no,
think
no.
they do something wrong.
Telling your mentees the mistakes and how they can learn from those mistakes if they are doing it.
Right. Well, I think I try to focus on that everyone makes mistakes, you know, because if you're, you know, if you're not making mistakes, then you're not making decisions. So when it comes to just like, you know, just being upfront, it's like, oh, maybe that wasn't the way it should have gone. But reminding them that it's not about each individual decision. It's about how many at-bats you're getting and how many opportunities you have to try. Because you're always going to be making mistakes. Throughout my journey, we had way more features that completely failed than things that worked. And I think that it's important to kind of focus on that aspect of just like any of those failures that they're going to happen. That's just part of the journey. And so, and also kind of going into it, something that didn't go right, there could be two things that happened. You could just be unlucky, or maybe you weren't prepared. But there could be both. You could sometimes, you know, something's only 60% likely to happen. You could just be on the wrong side of maybe, and things don't go right. But that doesn't mean that the decision was wrong. It just means it didn't work out. And so I think, you know, kind of going into it, you know, how you help with making those mistakes and building that resiliency for failure is just going to be making sure that you get as much attempts. So it's less about saying, oh, this didn't work out. It's saying, okay, what can we learn from it? And what's the next thing to try?
Anything you want to add?
So it's interesting. When I was starting my business, I made a lot of mistakes. I think that I was just okay making mistakes. And I believe that through struggle, it's actually one of the greatest teachers. So I don't necessarily see it as a problem when I see people that I'm working with making mistakes. Sometimes those are needed mistakes that we need to make. The goal of mentorship is sometimes not avoiding the mistake altogether, but helping somebody get picked back up, dusted off, and back to the track as soon as they can after they've fallen down. But going back to my story about when I started my business, I made a lot of mistakes. I remember very clearly someone saying to me, like, you know, you're trying to do this thing over here in software and website development. You're trying to do this thing over here doing IT services for people. And you're trying to do this thing over here selling lots of product. And maybe you should just focus on that. And at that time, I was thinking, no, I can make $1 here, I can make $1 there, I can make $1 over here. And I didn't hear the wisdom of them saying to focus on something. And so the reason why I shared this story with you is because one of the best ways that I help people avoid those same mistakes is just by telling stories. Come up with examples in my life, or I love to read, I find authors and their stories. If you can share a story with someone else, it's not as pressure-oriented as me saying to someone, you know, that's a really horrible idea, or don't do that because, you know, it's going to fail miserably. But if you can tell a story or a parable that makes them think about it differently, that has the best impact in my opinion.
The case study
Yeah.
method.
Oh,
yeah.
I love the case study, yeah.
So can you elaborate more on the case study method?
Oh, well, just that's like, I didn't go to Harvard Business School, but I know that they just do cases for like all of their classes. I went to Wharton and we don't do that, and we mock it in different ways. But anyway, but it's just a good way of learning, because like you see examples from other companies and it just brings things into your mind that might not have otherwise been there. But to what Todd was saying, it also puts the pressure down, because you're not saying this is, you know, basically you're kind of taking the zoomed out lens where you're looking at, okay, holistically, this is what happened in this situation. And it acknowledges that your situation isn't going to be exactly the same, because, you know, no two stories are the same. But it helps you to take different things. That's why I think, you know, you mentioned you're an avid reader. You know, as am I think part of why I like reading, part of why I like, you know, consuming new content, whether it's podcasts or anything, is because it brings those stories out. And then if you can then take those stories and, you know, put them together, synthesize them in a different way, then that's where a lot of ideas and a lot of innovation can come from. So, huge fan of stories.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I think I want to open up the floor to our students too. If you have any questions, I mean, it doesn't have to be related to mentorship. It could be related to entrepreneurship as well. Yes.
When you started with your businesses or entrepreneurship, you talk a little bit about failure. Was there any, when did you know that it's successful? Like when in your stage, like, did you know that you're actually, this is something that I need a hard focus on and pivot from
start a shot?
You can go.
Okay. I think the entire time I was building the company, like no joke, over like the entire 18 years, is like, oh, but this could all go to zero tomorrow. So, you know, that there was some acknowledgement that like currently is successful. We had a large exit in 2011 for 100 million. That's what brought us public. And, you know, at that point it's like, okay, so this is a next kind of phase of the company, but kind of growing it, you know, it all kind of felt fake at first until we got our, it was an online social network, so until we got our first 1 million members, and it was like, oh, this feels real. We opened an office, we started employing people, and I think that's when it really felt like, oh, there's actually, like, this is a real business. Like, people are trusting us to build something of value and to do that. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's when it felt successful, because it still felt like this is also incredibly risky. But that's when it felt real. That's when I realized I was like, oh, this is something that I'm going to be working on much harder and much more focused on, because I know that it means something to other people now.
It's very, very
I've suffered from the imposter syndrome my whole life. So I can say that, you know, starting a business and thinking like, oh, this is real, always felt like a trap to me. It didn't feel real, even up until after I sold it. When I sold my business, which was one of the greatest days of my life, I started coaching after that to help other businesses just like the one I had. And I got to go into their books and understand their business and start talking to them. And I started finding that many of those owners too felt like it was not anything more than a prop house of cards. Like, everyone was taking these risks and they weren't really sure they were doing it right. So I think that one of the indicators that you're doing things right is that feeling of discomfort. If it starts to be too comfortable, you might be too far on the edge of not taking risks.
Yeah.
And if it starts to feel too risky, right, maybe you need to take some chips off the table, or think about your mental health or stress levels or anything else that's causing you to feel that anxiety. So I do think that there's a balance between those two.
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question. So I mean, when we look at the data we collect from students, and you know, when we ask them, for example, why you don't take this initiative or something, and they will say, oh, my idea is maybe not good enough for the others, or they are sometimes afraid of competing with other students, and you know, they feel that they don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge, but it's kind of a hard barrier actually to move ahead for a lot of the students, and I think you give like good examples of that. Any other questions from our students?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say one of the biggest advantages of business or entrepreneurship in today is that we have access to the digital space, which has changed a lot. But in your opinion, what are some of the disadvantages of starting in today's world compared to when you started roughly 2 decades ago? And how would you suggest we mitigate those disadvantages?
So the question is, I want to make sure I understand it. What's the disadvantage of starting in the digital era?
Compared to when you started, yeah.
So
Not specifically the digital era, but just in entrepreneurship generally in today's world.
Not as old as you think I am, because I always thought one of my superpowers was that I could Google things better than other people. But I do think that you're living in an era where every video is available that you've ever made. And to this day, I still hate YouTube videos that I created with a marketing company that was inept that are out on YouTube forever. And that was actually professional business marketing. So I can't imagine, right, if you're putting things out there about yourself, do be guarded with your data. That's important. I think that's probably the one disadvantage I could think of, is what's out there about you already that could prevent you in the next role that you want to take on.
I think too, there's a lot more distraction. So distraction's easy to find, like, you know, when we were starting out too. Like, it's very easy to be distracted. You know, I subscribe to Near Isles Indistractable's thing of like, you become distracted because you're, because it's about discomfort. But at the same time, say you want to market your business, we're like, okay, well now I need to be making TikTok videos. Oh, well then an Instagram Reels. And now I need to also, should I be on X? Should I not be on X? Should I be on Blue Sky? Like, you know, it's a whole bunch of stuff that just didn't exist then. And, you know, the way that I think that I've always thought about it, and that I hope, you know, you are too, because like, there's basically never going to be enough, or there's always going to be enough things to fill your time. Like figuring out, oh, what should I do next is going to be the harder part, like the prioritization. And right now it seems like, okay, well, if I'm not making a TikTok reel, like should I be putting this on somewhere? Like, and I think my answer to that is generally like, do you want to? Because I think that comes down to, because I there's kind of like a pressure now to be everywhere, but you don't have to give into that pressure if that's not who you are. Like personally, I'm not really a TikTok person. I do have a TikTok. I've had it actually since it was Musical.ly in 2016. Yeah, I posted about 5 videos just because competitively I had to be aware of TikTok, but it was not my place. So that's not where I, spent my time versus like LinkedIn. You've seen me all over LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. And so I invested more of my time there. But I think it's so easy now, and kind of in the world we're in now, to be easily distracted by things. And so, and that's like, marketing your business, how you want to get the word out there. But it's also on the other side of like doing work when there's also all of these things that are just vying for your attention in a way that was impossible, 18 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago. And so I would say take advantage of, of everything that now the world has to offer, but also be sure to turn it off when you're doing deep focused work. Because I think that's probably one of the hardest things, is just like there's just so many things out there to kind of pull you away, that are designed to pull you away. And so making that intentional decision to be like, nope, this is focused work time. I'm in do not disturb mode. I'm not Googling anything right now.
It is really hard to do so. I try sometimes, but it is really hard to do.
Sometimes you just need to turn the Wi-Fi off in your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Digital detox is a real thing.
Digital, yeah. And I think I can comment on this a little bit too, because today, when you search something you have an idea, you search Google, I'm sure you will find 100 similar ideas, something like that. Especially same thing to research. We come up with a research idea. If I do like a scholarly research, I will find tons of them. That may discourage you. But you know what I do? I don't read them. Just I start working a little bit, let's see how much progress I can do. Then I start actually looking to, what others have done. Because it discourages you when
That's such a good point, because so many times it's like, oh, well, you need to be working on something that no one else has done before. It seems to be like pressure, but it's like, no, you don't. In fact, maybe you shouldn't be, because a lot of people have the same ideas around the same time. There's what's that called? Secondary invention.
I know that you're talking about, but I can't.
Right, like there's like 5 people thought of the light bulbs at the same time. The phone, multiple people thought of at the same time, and like one person gets the credit because they filed the patent first. But like other than that, when we were starting out my yearbook. Facebook was already at Harvard. It wasn't anywhere else yet, but it was, social network existed. There was, MySpace, which was very popular. There was Friendster, which I actually wrote my college admissions essay about. Don't be like Friendster, which was like, so there was Orchid. There were so many things that if we thought, oh, well, this idea exists, maybe we shouldn't build my yearbook, then we would have been, leaving a lot of value on the table, because just because an idea for something else exists doesn't mean that your spin won't be unique, won't be innovative, and it also doesn't mean that you won't execute better than anyone else has. And so I think it's important to be aware of what the competitive landscape looks like, but when you're thinking about ideas of what you want to try, what you want to build, don't be discouraged just because you Googled it. It's like, oh, it exists already. It's like everything exists already.
Okay, if I may move to the next question related to mentoring, could you give an example of transformational mentorship relationship? I mean, both sides. You affect your mentee, and then you learn from your mentee as well. Any examples that you can share us?
I can share one.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So actually, Penn State hooked me up here with a student who had come through one of your programs. I think it was a summer program. And they're from Mexico. They were building a software firm. And I had never coached this kind of business before, but I agreed to take them on as a coach. And I found I learned a lot about that industry in working through their journey, and ended up pivoting my own business and coaching around some of the things that they were teaching me about their space. at the same time I was teaching them about things that I had expertise in. And so we've become good friends now after coaching
Oh, really?
for 3 years. So I do think that if you're not getting something back, if you're mentoring someone, it shouldn't just be a one-way street. It should be both ways, give and take, just like a relationship. The moment that you stop feeling like you're showing up and getting something out of that, that's probably a good time to say, you know what, you need to find a different mentor or a different coach, because it should be symbiotic.
And kind of to piggyback on that, like, there's just, you know, so there's the pressure. I think there's some kind of this pressure as an entrepreneur, is like find a mentor, find a mentor. But like, I don't think I've ever had like one mentor. I've had phases of my life where I've turned to different people for different things. So, and that has varied. So like, you know, my brother's, who I started a company with, is in many ways a mentor. He's also a peer. And when I was dealing with, so when we were first newly public, I was 21, and the Yahoo message boards were like a disgusting, vulgar place, and they would take photos of me and make disgusting, vulgar comments. And I kind of mentored through that too. One of the other women in my company kind of took me under her wing and helped me learn, like, you know, how to deal with issues like that, which I hope no one here will ever have to deal with issues like that. But at the same time, you know, this was someone who I turned to specifically for help with this one issue. And so finding a mentor that can guide you through all areas of your life is kind of a high bar. And like, like that unicorn mentor may not exist, but that shouldn't stop you from looking to, you know, other people who are there for you. And that could also be more of a friend-tour situation. So Dean Erica James at Wharton, one of her, there's this article about her and her friend tour, who's I think president of another university, and they have this friendship relationship that's also mentorship, because they're such close friends, but they've also helped guide each other throughout their careers. And I think that's more common. That's the more common relationship I'm seeing, where it's like taking you through. And so, like, you know, my friends I went to graduate school with, or that I went to undergrad with, we're also mentors to each other, because, you know, when we reach out, we share things, we try to help each other where we can. And I think that kind of give and take relationship that exists in friendships also does, you know, can exist in that mentorship relationship. And so I think, you know, if you haven't found that unicorn mentor, you know, kind of look around. There's mentors all around you. You just have to realize who you need to ask for advice. You know, and they could just be the person already sitting next to you.
I think that you make a really good point. There's not just one mentor. I think that you need a network of support, and you just need to tag in the person who can help you through the challenge that you're going through. One of my favorite things to do is read, as I said before. So I've started different book clubs at times with people who were journeying through something, almost as a pure group of support. And you find that they start mentoring each other if you get together to talk about the book, and eventually the conversation morphs into whatever's going on in people's lives. So, you know, don't be afraid to lean into the friend tour concept that way.
Yeah, and also if you don't know the person already, Paul Miller, who wrote The Path of Path, he has something called Path Expert Conversations. Like, you can just reach out to someone, you know, maybe on LinkedIn a few years ahead of where you currently are, and they'll be able to kind of give the best view of the things they felt kind of going on their journey. And they'll have the wonderful thing about reaching out to people cold is a lot of people do respond, and not only do they respond, they kind of love talking about themselves. So you just need to ask them, and usually they're happy to share. It's like, oh, let me tell you about my career and how I got there. And there's usually a lot you can learn just from that, from just, you know, doing that kind of cold outreach can also be incredibly helpful.
Any other questions?
I have another question. You guys have a lot of success, but is there any point in your life that you have felt you still regret to this day, and how did you deal with that? How to deal with regret, basically?
I'll share a regret. So because I started my business very young, and I was so focused on it, at some points it started to feel like the snowball chasing me down the hill, and I couldn't get out from behind it fast enough, or away from it fast enough. So one of the things that I say is, I wouldn't change anything, and if I was in the same situation, I'd probably make all the same decisions. But looking back now, one of the things that I have learned that I appreciate is travel and getting out in the world and seeing new countries and new places. And I put the blame on that for the fact that in my 20s, when I could have been doing those things, I was so driven and singular focused on this one thing. So when I coach people now, I'm always talking about work-life balance and making sure that you're not just solely focused on the goal, the outcome, the quarterly statement, whatever it's going to be. So I call it a regret. I probably would still have made the same mistake if I had had a mentor. Maybe I wouldn't have at that time. I don't think I really started to look for mentors until I was maybe 10 years into my business and realized that I was running into some of these walls. So maybe that's a second regret, is look for a mentor earlier.
Right. It's right now, it's hard to think of a regret. Like I'm sure I have plenty of regrets. Like one thing, like, you know, there's even when it comes to like high school, it's like, you know, I really wanted to do Model UN. I never could. In college, there was things I wanted to do in college I never could. So I guess they're kind of regrets, but they're not like deep regrets. I think for most decisions, like, you know, I probably would have made again at the time, but more so enough time has passed that, like, you know, time heals that wound of whatever that regret was. But something I will say that it doesn't really fit as a regret because I think it stopped me in my tracks and made me reprioritize things. Was, you know, my body would typically let me know when I was doing too much. So I remember in high school, I was my senior year of high school, and I was being on CNBC for the first time. I got, and there's all this other stuff, but it was like finals week. It was bad, or midterm week, I guess. But I got 104-degree fever coming back from CNBC. Took a calculus exam. Well, I didn't know I had a fever at the time I was taking the calculus exam, but like I had to leave the exam because I was so ill. Got like a 64 on it, did not go well. And, you know, I was so physically ill from all this stress I was putting on myself. And then I was just better. Then the next time I was on CNBC again, another 104-degree fever. So what I learned from that was that I need to slow it down. And that's something that I started getting better at as I got older and started realizing this. In college, I remember I was going through a really tough time. My longtime boyfriend and I had recently broken up. There was stuff going on in the business at the time. I think we were raising our Series B. It must have been our Series B. I had this awful knee pain, and my health took a dive. Basically, I was so inflamed. I guess I had so much inflammation in my body that I was like setting off sensors for different rheumatoid arthritis, which is a autoimmune disease, which I don't have, but all my markers were for it basically because I was so like sick. I was getting heart palpitations all the time. Anyway, it was bad. I started slowing things down a bit, took control of my health, ate a little bit better. Apparently leafy greens good for you. But it was one of those things where like you don't notice until things are getting bad. And then the same thing happened, you know, much more recently. This was one of the things that led into me deciding, you know, kind of leaving my company. The postpartum experience after I had my daughter was I was sick all the time. And part of that I think was the stress because I knew that the company was about to be restructured. There's going to be a lot of things going on. And you know, that's not a fun period when you're recovering from giving birth, but then I also was so stressed out that I got shingles as like, you know, mid-30s, and shingles is very painful, also kind of gross. It's one of those things though that it was another sign of my body just saying like, you should stop this. And it was like coming off maternity leave. Now I have shingles, first day back, and it's like, why am I doing this? What choices can I make in my life to, you know, prioritize my health, prioritize, you know, the things that really matter to me right now, which, you know, is my family and, you know, wanting to make sure I'm around for my family. And so I think that, you know, when it comes to regrets, usually I felt like health-wise, my body would tell me this is too much. So I think that like when, you know, stress and health-related things are the only things I really, really regret, because those are the things that like you can't, if your health goes south, yes, you can turn it around, but sometimes you can't always. And so prioritize it, get your sleep, eat leafy greens, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
What made you sell your company and start something else?
For me, it was stress. So I had a similar experience. I would have back issues where all of a sudden my back would go out, like the muscles would pull my spine in different directions, and I just wouldn't be able to walk, and I'd lay on the floor for 2 weeks until I was better. Literally, my body was saying to me, just slow down. And so that happened enough time. And in 2016, I had 4-year-olds with my wife. We have twins. And I was going through another issue of this back problem. And so we had planned this trip coming up in a couple months. We ended up planning this trip like a year in advance to go away for a sabbatical, like a 2.5 month sabbatical living in Costa Rica. I told you, I decided I like travel, so I started to pay attention to that. And so we went down there, and it was such a sudden, dramatic change of life. Eating healthy, exercising every day, playing with the kids every day, getting to do something that I had really ignored for the first 4 years of their life because I was so focused on business. And I said, what am I doing this for? Why am I killing myself on this? It's a great company, it's a great job, but the company was running itself. And I have always found that when I get to a spot in my life that I feel like just don't feel the right kind of challenge anymore, that I need to reprioritize on something else. So for me, I took that sabbatical, I got healthier, I realized what I was doing that was causing me a lot of stress, and I came back and I immediately wrote a document that said, by 2020, I'm going to sell my company for this much money. I'll kind of put this vision board together of what to do. And 2 years later, I had sold it for more than I expected. And for me, I wasn't expecting to stop working. I was expecting, because if you just all of a sudden like win the lottery tomorrow, it doesn't actually bring you happiness. You just find other problems. So you still need something to do with your life. And so for me, what I decided to do was let me find the thing that I can do that might occasionally have some stress, but it doesn't feel like that soul-crushing, pulling your back out of position kind of stress that just erodes your quality of life. It was very clear, like I knew I needed to do it.
Okay, but let me turn the table a little bit. You mentioned the stress, the time that you put. I mean, this is, if you want to achieve something, if you want to do something, you have to take time. It's not going to happen. Okay, and was it worth it?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the point.
And
that
I'm
I
doing
want-
it again. I started other businesses.
Yes.
So,
So I think this generation is actually much better than my generation in terms of thinking of those issues before they become a problem. But eventually you have to put that time, you have to put that effort to your company to be successful. But what you're saying is, you could better manage it. There was ways to better manage it. Today, it is possible, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's, when you're up at that point, I think there's always like, wait, why am I doing this? Like, there's the reprioritization of like, does this actually need to be done, or am I telling myself I need to do it? Like, what is the actual expectation here? What is it that actually needs to happen? And a lot of times you start deprioritizing the health stuff because or just the personal stuff, just because that's the things that, you feel like you can kind of push off to the side more easily than you can other people's expectations of you, or your perceived thinking of what their expectations are of you. When in reality, sometimes you have to just say, you know what, let me just take a break from the company for a week, reset, and a lot of times when you give yourself that resting point and that time to reflect, that's when bigger ideas come. That's when you can get recharged and want to actually do more. But if you continue just to kind of like run yourself into the ground, you're just going to feel worse the next day. So if you're realizing that, it's like, you have to get through the not fun parts, of course, but the not fun parts shouldn't be killing you. They should just be like, oh, this is unpleasant because this part's a slog. But like, there should be something that you're excited and working for. And if you can't find that thing, then it's not fun right now. And you need to kind of assess, how could you make it be fun again? How could you make it be something you actually want to be spending your time on? Because your time is precious, and so is your health.
I mean, I think you have to be really cognizant of the burnout, because burnout is actually, kills your productivity, kills your creativity and everything.
You know,
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So I found part of my replenishment cycle that I have to follow now is I like to hike and I like to go on like Appalachian Trail in the woods, no cell phone service hiking for a couple of days at a time. And I get my best ideas out there. In the quiet, when you quiet the noise of all those other distractions, the best things come out of it. And one of the things that I've also seen happen is some of the happiest entrepreneurs that I meet are people who are starting their second business after they've made a lot of these mistakes and learned how to balance these different things. Now they know what they can and cannot do, and they're more okay either being not perfect or not having that expectation of perfection, which sometimes people charge into it with, or they're okay letting people down. Like there's boundaries, there's much better boundaries.
like your second kid, you know, yeah, that's okay. In the first kid, you are like very cautious about that, but in the second, yeah, not a problem. Okay, I think I'm gonna conclude here. I know we have 2 more questions to go, but I want to give some time. Here's the question, yeah.
So I wanted to ask, like, I know you both talked about starting over. So I wanted to ask, like, how do you encourage them to believe in like your new project? Like, especially since like you have to, like, previously you said you had placed like a foundation on basically what other people thought of you. So when you start this new project, do you go over that, or do you like start again? Or how does that?
So I feel like with, even when I was at the Meet Group, the whole company felt like it was reborn like 5 different times. Just because so much changed in the world as it was being created. And I think, we always had like our history, kind of like our track record, which was useful when, for instance, we're shifting to mobile and it's like, but we don't monetize there. Don't worry, we're going to figure that out. The way you kind of get by that is through telling stories, through finding that kind of vision to communicate it, and have other people invest in that idea. It's like, oh, okay, that's going to happen. And so as we were kind of starting over through each like different phase of our company, we always kind of had like in the background, like this was our track record, this is what we've done, but that didn't mean that didn't like necessarily say what you could do next. And so that was kind of just the realization is like, oh, it's fresh. You can figure out wherever you want it to take you. And that's kind of like every other decision too. Like your history always comes with you. But then if you want to take a 90-degree turn, you basically always can. Now what your track record is going to be there, how similar things are is going to be there as well. But it doesn't really fully matter as much as like just being in the game and being and realizing that you can make your own decisions and you don't have to like stick with with your 1.0 version before that. And I think that's kind of freeing.
I have you ask the question again, because I thought what I was hearing was.
Did I answer the question?
No, I'm
Sorry.
not sure. I'm not sure. I may not have been paying attention properly. But I thought what I heard was you're saying, how do you get people involved, or is it how do you get yourself involved in?
I was basically asking like how you can like so basically starting over involves like basically applying what you did before, like she said, like kind of having your track record count as like a resume. But I meant that like when it comes to like maybe when you have a change of like an emotional change and a mental change, like how do you apply that to your business? Like combining all the versions of change.
I'm a huge fan of strategy days, and where you actively sit down and you do like, here are my core value exercises, or here are my strengths, my opportunities, my weaknesses and threats. Both personal strategy, but also for businesses when they're building these plans. I think if you can take those things that you've learned or made yours and incorporate it into whatever this new issue or project is, you find a lot more passion.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
One more last thing. I'm also a big fan of like stakeholder dialogues. They basically not just like looking internally, figuring what you want, but actually having that conversation with the main stakeholders in your life, whether that be your friends, a parent, a partner, a business partner, like. And figuring out like making sure that you're all aligned, especially I guess in the early stage with your co-founders, making sure you have the same exact views in mind and have the same expectations of what you expect going into this company. Because if one co-founder is like, we're going to be working 100-hour weeks. It's going to be fantastic. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not what I'm signing up for. That's an important discussion to have, you know, outright. And it's not that one person has a harder work ethic than the other person. It's that they have different priorities. And so it's important to have those priority setting moments to make sure that you're aligned.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to stop here. The reason is because I want to give like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to network with the students. If you have like questions, I think you can ask our panelists in person. You know, I think that's kind of important too, to have that like the one-to-one connection. Thank you very much for your time and coming here and wonderful answers. Let's give our presenters